Hey, today we will talk about congruence bias. It's one of those mental habits that most of us fall victim to without even realizing it. At its core, it's the tendency to test ideas or hypotheses in a way that confirms what we already believe, instead of trying to disprove them or explore alternatives. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's closely related to confirmation bias, but with a subtle difference. Where confirmation bias leads us to favor evidence that supports our existing beliefs, congruence bias influences how we test those beliefs in the first place. Congruence bias happens because our brains love efficiency. It's quicker and easier to test ideas that seem to align with what we already think than to challenge those ideas by exploring alternatives. This might save us time in simple situations, but in more complex scenarios, it can lead us to overlook important possibilities or make faulty conclusions. Congruence bias can affect decisions in fields as diverse as medicine, science, and criminal justice. For instance, a doctor might jump to a diagnosis based on a patient's most obvious symptoms and then order tests that confirm that diagnosis rather than considering less common but equally plausible alternatives. In the justice system, investigators might focus on evidence that supports their theory of a suspect's guilt while overlooking signs that point to their innocence. One of the most famous examples of congruence bias in science comes from the 19th century physicist and chemist Michael Faraday. When experimenting with electromagnetic induction, he didn't limit himself to tests that confirmed his hypotheses. Instead, he actively sought ways to disprove them, leading to groundbreaking discoveries. Faraday's approach is a great reminder that progress often comes from challenging assumptions rather than reinforcing them. So how do we combat congruence bias? The key is to adopt a more scientific mindset in our thinking. Instead of asking, how can I prove I'm right? Try asking, how can I test whether I'm wrong?